recognize your watches.
Yeah, take one, right?
Take one.
We gotta get ourselves one of those, babe. All right, here we go. Hey y'all, Pastor Emil here with another episode of Sweet Jesus. Ice cream is sweet, life is sweet, bodies are sweet. Jesus becomes a zygote, an embryo today, the Annunciation. So Jesus is sweeter than ice cream, but Jesus is sweet enough to inhabit a body and give us this gift to inhabit as well. I am excited to be here again with some folks from the Archdiocese of New Orleans, some Roman Catholic folks here to talk about the theology of the body. And we are looking to dig in past our little introduction, hey, get to meet everybody, and sort of our rambling back and forth. And who knows, you know what, the way my history is, we'll probably do a lot of that.
Yeah.
Hopefully everyone's okay with that, but I think we're going to have some wonderful nuggets in here today. Today I think we're going to start mainly just describing some terms, right?
Yeah.
And giving some background to help understand why, a framework for understanding this theology of the body. And I think it's actually really helpful. I think it's something that most people don't understand, that fundamentally behind everything that people are talking about today, there are these ideas, these assumptions that according to the Bible, according to God, Jesus, are fundamentally flawed.
Right.
So that's why we're going to kind of take some baby steps in, wade in rather slowly into this. But I think there's some tremendous meat here. It's not going to be something that's not fruitful, helpful, meaningful. So,
Amen.
The framework for understanding a lot of what takes place in this theology of the body is what you guys call, or Pope John Paul II called, original man, historical man, and eschatological man.
Yeah.
Who wants to dive in first with giving some kind of explanation to that? I kind of have an idea, but I didn't invite you all here to just hear myself talk. So
let me take the first crack at that, because I could probably do it fastest, but then it'll need to be unpacked, and then you can. So Pastor Emil, you were just talking about how, these assumptions that we have of ourselves and how we live in the world. There are elements of that are inadequate, right? They're true as far as they go, but they're not always enough to explain, And that's always been the case, when we're trying to deal with, moral questions. And that was the case with the Pharisees and in Jesus' time. I mean, the John Paul II, when he was writing the Theology of the Body, he started with the controversy over divorce between Jesus and the Pharisees. And they asked, the Pharisees asked Jesus, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? And Jesus didn't just say yes or no. He referred to the beginning. He said, did you not read that in the beginning God created us male and female, and that for this reason man will leave his mother and father, be joined to his wife? And so, what John Paul II wanted to do was reread that beginning. Like, well, what did Jesus mean by the beginning? Yeah. In the beginning, like, how did things happen at the beginning? And he was referring to and quoting the first chapter of Genesis. God created man in his own image, male and female. And so his catechesis about the body, or his catechesis about human love, takes its cues from the biblical narrative, from what God revealed to us about ourselves in the first chapters of Genesis. And by reading the biblical narratives and thinking about it and trying to unfold it, he kind of comes up with this new language to articulate what the different dimensions or the different layers that are there in the Bible. And so what was man's original condition? What does it mean to be a human being from the beginning? And he identifies these three sort of layers. And the first layer he calls original man. And this is man as God intended and created man to be from the beginning. So this is man put in air quotes, before the experience of sin, before the disintegration of the relationship between God and man, before the man that before his experience of sin. And John Paul II calls this experience of sin and the original sin kind of a boundary experience that we don't have in history. It's something that happens outside of history. None of us have an experience of what it's like to have no sin at all, right? To not be affected of it. But it's discussed in the scriptures what that experience was like. Adam and Eve, were naked and had no shame, which is a very mysterious statement, and it has something to do with man in his original state. And so that's what original man is man in the original state prior to sin. And then that layer is always there. Like, who God created us to be is who I am now. God, when I want to understand myself, I need to understand that I was not created for sin, that I was created to be in perfect communion with God, that God is my Father, and He created me, and He is my origin. That's still true about me today. Like, that's an important element of how I can understand who I am even now. But who I am now in the historical context, I'm also a person who's affected by sin, who sins, who is affected by the sinfulness of others, who lives in this kind of experience of brokenness in the context of the historical time that we're in. And the biblical narrative talks about that. There's the original sin, Adam and Eve, they eat the apple, and then there's all of these effects, right? There's like what happens to man and work, what happens to the woman and their experience of child labor, and all of these. There's all of these effects or results that come from sin that now affect our experience. And so, I'm a historical being. I live in a world in time where I am affected by sin. I sin. I'm affected by sin. Sin is something that I have to deal with, and that's another layer. And so that's historical man. So the first layer was original man, how God was, how the human being before sin. Historical man is our context in history where we do experience sin. And then there's eschatological man, which is a big mouthful word, right? So the eschaton in Greek just means the end time, right? And so the eschatological is what man will be at the end, right? Because who I am now has a destiny, right? Even in the original narrative, as soon as God is, the effects of sin are being, God is talking about the effects of sin in the world. He's also already, right from the beginning, talking about, your child will crush the head of the serpent.
Yeah.
Right? So already there's a destiny of overcoming sin, of reuniting with God in a full capacity way. There's already a promise that of the kind of conquering of sin in the end. And that gives us great hope, because even now, in my own experience of myself, I have all three of these layers. I am the Son of God. I am His creation. I am good. No matter how much I sin, no matter how much sin affects me, I can't erase the original truth of who I am as God's creature. So that's one layer, and that's a truth that's true about me. It's also true about me that I do sin. I'm affected by sin. I struggle with sin. Even if I'm growing in virtue and I'm doing better, other people's sin affect me. The world is kind of a broken place. The world is a difficult place to live. I call out to God for help. I need His help. That's my historical context. And even if I am caught up in the depths of sin, right? Even if I'm the worst sinner that you can imagine, there's a hope that the brokenness of the world will be overcome through the grace and power of Jesus Christ, who is, the Son of the woman, right? And so I have a call or a destiny towards this full communion with God, this hope for heaven, this hope for resurrection. And that's part of me too. That gives me the courage to deal with my historical context. And so what we find is like what the Bible says about what it means to be human is complex and multi-layered and kind of rich, and actually does in a beautiful way does kind of give insight to why is it so hard to be human? Like, why is it, the Bible kind of helps us to see that.
Way complicated.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about that? I mean, how do you understand that? Is that how you would say it? What would you add? What would you add from your experience? Or, what's the significance of thinking about this in this 3 layers here, the original, historical?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm going to cut in. So yeah, the way I see, original man, historical man, eschatological man is a little bit simpler because I'm not a theologian. I'm not a philosopher theologian.
Rescue me, help me.
Rescue everyone that just fell asleep for the last 10 minutes.
Sorry.
We have both Pastor Emil and Chris, the theologians in the building.
I guess the way, and I'm coming at it, from a recovery standpoint. That's what I do day in and day out. That's what I live in. So recovery is a way of life for me, and not just a profession. So I kind of tend to see things through that lens. But I think it makes it a little bit. It might make it a little simpler for some people. But when I think of original man, I'm thinking of it's all of this is in terms of relation to me. So this is relational because with sexual integrity ministry and sexual addiction work, it's an intimacy disorder. So it's all about relationship and healing the relationships and learning how to connect with other people. So I'm thinking in terms of that, relationally and with communion. So with original man, it's kind of like this is this is how it was from the beginning, was this communion, and this relationship was where it needed to be with God, with self, and with other people. So you got Adam's relationship to himself, the integrated, body and soul harmony there. Then you got his and also no shame, like Chris had mentioned. So there's a good connection with the self, relation to self, relation to other people, to Eve, is there, and there's a good everything is integrated. It's all he's not using her and subjecting her to his whims or whatever. It's a loving communion with another person, and then with God, he's walking in the cool of the day with God. He's talking with him. He's in that relation. So that's kind of where we were meant to be, in union with God, with ourselves, and with other people, in that communion. Then moving into historical man, kind of where we are now after the fall, we lost that union with God, that communion with Him, with ourselves. We're full of shame. A lot of us hate ourselves. We don't like things about us. We feel very insecure. So we have all these self issues. We have trouble forgiving ourselves. So we don't really have authentic.
We hide from God. We hide from each other.
Exactly.
We hide from ourselves.
So we have this disconnect with ourselves and a disconnect with the relation with God, obviously, and then of course with other people. Looking at Adam and Eve. Well, now a lot of us, we struggle with using the other person. So, and it both ways, the women do it too. Not just
I
us.
love how you looked over this way when making that comment.
Yeah.
So, but we have that disconnect of the union between ourselves, God, and others now. It's kind of the reality that we live in, even though we're still good, we're still creating the image of God.
And we still yearn for that.
And we still yearn for that.
Yeah.
So there is that, it's kind of both in one. But, and then we look forward to, the resurrection, like as all believers. We look for the resurrection of the dead and for the life of the world to come. And in that world to come, it will be a reunion of body and soul. It will be a reunion of the bride, who is us,
God,
and Christ, who is the bridegroom. So it's kind of like that reunion, that recommunion. So we had this relationship. It's been broken down between us, God, and others. It's been broken, and we need to come back together, and that's the ultimate destiny. And we can begin that now. We don't have to wait until the resurrection to begin to have a connection with ourselves, with God, and with others. We begin that healing process.
And Jesus that's what makes Jesus so sweet, right?
He facilitates everything.
He helps bring that future into the present and guides us toward that original plan. there's a lot there.
I mean,
think.
Jesus in himself reunites all of those things, right?
'Cause
God
he
and
becomes
man,
present.
Right.
Yeah.
right? God with the integrity of Jesus' own integrity with himself, the integrity of the relationship that he has with the Father, and the integrity of his relationship with everyone he meets.
Yeah.
You know, when he goes around, he preaches the good news, he heals the people, people follow him. You know, he in himself, he reunites all that, and then the grace of Christ is poured out through the cross and through the grace through the church, and so we participate and live that now. We're already living the end time, like we're already in a certain way participating in it, even as we look forward to it. It's beautiful. I mean, really, we're using these like technical terms that John Paul II came up with, historical man and original man, but really it's just the gospel is all
Right.
we're talking about, right?
Right.
Yeah, well, it's not as simple as that for everybody, right? I mean, not everybody it's just the gospel. Like, then we wouldn't have these books, right? We wouldn't-
That's right.
all the videos, right? Christopher West has got tons of videos. I've seen a few of them now, which, interestingly enough, maybe talk about one of them at one point. Naomi, though, before, we let the two gents have their say. What have you got to add to this? Just generally respond to what they're saying, add to what they're saying, affirm what they're saying, push back a little bit, practical applications.
Really, I mean, I feel like they have said it all. Maybe for just right now, it'd be nice to have a kind of even more a simplistic way of just summarizing it. So original man is the human being before original sin came into being, and then historical man is man after the fall, and then eschatological man is where we're going, right? Where after Jesus' redemption, and I mean that's just pretty much took over the world, right? The effect of Jesus' redemption has already happened. It's still we're feeling the effect of it, but that's where we're going. So there's really not much for me to add. However, the one thing I did want to throw in there is when original sin, it doesn't matter, even before original sin came into the picture, another relationship that got a little bit discombobulated is man and creation.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
there's
Very good point.
definitely, that's another
That's right. Yeah.
relationship.
By the
that-
sweat of your brow,
Yeah.
you're going to work the land. And
And we were supposed to be stewards, of the world.
what
Right.
I say sometimes, just to aggravate the conservative Christians I hang around with, because it's become a politicized thing, but the one command from God that precedes the fall, right? So like the very first one is take care of this place,
Right.
right? So like before everything goes to hell in a handbasket, I mean,
That's
he's
right.
like, you're here, you exist to take care of this place. So I think we
Yes.
lose that in the politicization of it.
Yep.
And I'm not
Yes.
necessarily taking a political position. I get that, any political position
complex.
can be weaponized,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But hey, we can plant trees, right? Like maybe we disagree on
We can
Paris
recycle.
Climate Accord, or, we can do some of these basic things, I think. So.
Save on energy. I mean, and we're not going into the politics. We're just going to, Pastor, what you said, the Word of God.
Yeah.
That's what God said.
Yeah.
Period. Right? Enough said. So anyways, that's just another thing, another relationship that we're talking about here.
Right.
Not only with God, man, and then of course, Gary kind of spoke on it. To me, Theology of the Body, of course, opened my eyes, especially when I saw kind of before the fall, the relationship between man and woman, and then the disintegration that happens once original sin comes. And it just helps when you reflect back and you see, why is there so much woundedness and confusion and competition between man and woman?
Mm-hmm.
And especially in our postmodern world, we definitely have many examples of
Yeah.
that. So of course that always hit home, just to see that it wasn't always the case. but it's okay. You know, Jesus came to show us again what it meant, or what it means to be a human being.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that Jesus has done for us,
A
besides saving us.
truly human.
Yeah.
He shows us what it means to
A
truly be
fully
human.
human, alive, who's a live human being, and what does that person look like? So we can kind of find our way back, in a way,
Yep.
to discover who we really are. And John Paul II says this thing where there's an echo of original man in our hearts. So
Yeah.
there's a distant memory in all of us that we kind of remember
It's still there.
who we
it's
really
still,
are.
Yeah.
And so that's why you can work on it. That's why we are works in progress. We're not things you just discard because you're junk. You know what? I'm just a problem case. Let's just give up. You know?
Yeah.
No. Like, absolutely not. There's, you have that glimmer of
Mm-hmm.
who you really are in there, no matter how much sin has affected your life.
Right.
So.
Well, and just the fact, not only that, but that if we feel like we're not right, everyone feels that.
Yeah.
Right, so there's this
Right.
sense, I think, today that, well, God made me this way, God doesn't make junk, you're beautiful exactly how you are, right, all that kind of stuff. But yet no matter, the statistics say no matter what we do to help people, affirm people in any of the variety of things that, we could talk about, they still aren't really okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They still have, all kinds of baggage that they're wrestling with. And I think it's just helpful to say that you're not alone. I mean, we all have this sense in which we're missing something
Right.
that we are supposed to have had,
Right.
and it may be our fault, but we still miss it. And we're longing also then for this ultimate repair of it
Right.
all. And, we may not think of it that way, but it's why, any story you read, any fairy tale, any movie, any kind of story that, has some kind of a good ending, right? We have stories in fiction with good endings because ultimately we're all kind of longing for that. Now you may get to the end of that and say, hey, well that was nice, but it's not really,
It's not real.
It's make-believe, like that's not
Yeah.
actually going to happen. Well, what if it was true? Like, don't you want it to be true?
Right.
One of the things that, just on the practical, I had just 2 points on because obviously I'm the one that's good. I wanted to go first because I knew I'd go and then y'all would help ground it. But there's 2 really practical things that come to mind with that. I mean, the one hand, it's very discouraging to live a life and just say things are not right. Things in the world are not right. Things inside of me are not right. Things in my family are not right. There's just wrong everywhere. And we have that experience, right? That's like a real part of our experience. And we all experience it, and we can kind of grind down. We can become very pessimistic about the world, right? But one of the things that John Paul II, when he kind of unfolds these different layers, is that you would not have any idea that there was something wrong unless you had this echo of what right is.
Yeah.
Like you have,
Yeah.
that means that the way things ought to be, or the way things could be, or should be, is in your heart somewhere.
And that's, yeah.
And because you have that, there's a call in you. We experience a call, we experience a hope or a yearning for how things ought to be, and that's just as much part of our experience as the negative side that says there's something's not right.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of an interesting thing. Like, even whenever I get discouraged or whenever I get frustrated, which I do, I also go, yeah, but that's because somehow deep down I know things underneath. Sometimes you think the whole story is just the story of sin, but sin's on the surface, and underneath is the true reality of the goodness of the world and the love that God has for the world. And
So-
that's just like, okay, then I can deal with my problems, right?
And I don't know who came first. It's possible Pope John Paul did, because he wrote this before he became Pope.
So he
right?
was working on it. So so the story goes that he had written a book called Love and Responsibility, which was a precursor to this work, and then he was working on this, and he had it like in notes of another book. and then he gets called to become the Pope, and he knew he wouldn't be able to write a book. And so what he did was he took those outlines and filled them out, and then he offered them as like talks. So every Wednesday he would give another little talk, and that's how he delivered it, little by little, came out in trickles.
His term as Pope, how long? What were the years of that?
So he was elected Pope in 1968. When was it? Oh, I should know
It was
this.
the late 70s when he started writing.
68 was the Vatican
yeah,
Council, that's why I
so-
get that. So it was the late 70s.
So it was like
then all through-
1980 when he was shot, I think.
Yeah.
Right? Around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he died in 2005. So it was a long pontificate. It was a long
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
But the reason I brought it up is just when you started talking about that, it made me think of Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail, where he talks about resisting an unjust law, and then, well, how do you know when something's unjust? The only way you know it's unjust is if you have a higher law
Yeah.
to compare it to.
That's right.
And so, a lot of people today, I think, miss that. They're in so many things, so many ways trying to fight back against injustice and evil, and perhaps rightly so, but they forget that that actually proves,
Yeah.
theism. It proves
There's a good.
Yeah, that
There's a good to aim for, and sometimes it's an error for us to go fighting against all of the broken things, which we should. Like, obviously, we shouldn't be content with things not being the way they should be. I mean, so there's nothing in what I'm hoping to say goes to that. But if we don't aim, and if our focus isn't on the true good, and our focus is always on trying to correct an evil, then it's easy for us to have an unintended consequence, right? By correcting one evil, we're instantiating a different evil, right?
Or using evil to get to the good,
Yeah,
right? So
you
you wind up doing something that winds up making your witness or your the way you're trying to shine this light on good, you're actually adding evil.
Yeah, by you end up, and it's an easy error. I mean, we see that kind of error all the time, and so by getting clear about the good that we're aiming for and the whole rich, beauty of that good, then it actually integrates, interestingly, and balances all of the other lesser goods in there that follow from that, right? So, we want to, a very, very simple political and overly simplified issue would be like, we want equality among women, right? We want women to have equal opportunities and that kind of stuff. But there's a way in which the promotion of women's rights ends up in some ways resulting in kind of a conflict or a fight between men and women, right? And a kind of breaking down of the relational dimension. And it's difficult in this realm of equality for men and women to trust each other, right? I mean, that's part of our cultural experience, I think. And
I'm not sure if the women's movement caused that.
no, I don't think the women's movement caused it. No,
that's
right.
Historical,
Those two things have gone hand. I mean, whether one caused the other, I'm not trying to lay that out. But
I'm not saying you said that. I'm
Yeah.
just saying that we were fighting with, from the fall near the
right.
beginning.
It was whose
At the
fault was
beginning.
this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the John Paul II, for example, in the his discussion of the original sin, Adam and Eve, they eat the apple, and there's always been kind of an argument that it was her
really
fault,
Eve's
it was
fault.
your fault or whatever.
Well, I think we can end that
Yeah.
debate because the Scripture universally blames Adam.
That's right. Absolutely. That's right. It's the
Right?
fall of
Okay,
Adam.
then.
It's the fall of Adam.
Adam's
The
fault.
scripture says, she gave the fruit to her husband, who was with her. He was right there the whole time. It was
Yeah.
it was something that they did together. But from the beginning of this historical context, there's been sort of this fight between this distrust, this brokenness, this shame, these different ideas. Blame shifting, all that stuff.
Oh,
and
word.
and there's a way in which, in our own context, what I'm pointing to is in our modern context, in our attempt to address real issues that come from that kind of brokenness, sometimes we can pursue those things in a way that just further instantiate even more warring, and because because we lost sight of the good of the integration, like the good of marriage, the good of the union and the common life of man and woman, and of the ability of man and woman to cooperate in such a way that they can foster and found and care for a community. Our society today really doesn't understand how that man and woman can live together.
Right. It's like
You
the
know,
complementarity of the masculine and feminine, and they go together, they help each other, they're made for each other. And with the fall, historical man, we have this tension between the sexes, and it creates this like you said, this disintegration, this now it's
adversarial.
It's like, what can we do to the other person to submit them to us and get our way over them, and the women, trying to fight against the men, and it's just like this constant.
Well, I mean, that is what, you said, your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you, right? And desire for your husband, what does that mean? Well, there's a lot